Princess Arya stood on the balcony of the Imperial Palace, watching the distant stars flicker in the night sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the safety of her world, another battle was being fought, another pointless clash between her people and the humans. She closed her eyes and felt the familiar wave of exhaustion wash over her. 15 years of war, 15 years of death and destruction, and for what? Her father had called her to his chambers that morning with news that changed everything. The War Council had finally agreed to his proposal. A marriage alliance. A union between the Kelvar Empire and humanity to end the bloodshed. And she was to be the bridge between two species that had spent over a decade trying to destroy each other. Arya turned away from the view and walked back into her room. Her attendants had laid out formal robes for the meeting, but she ignored them. This was not a celebration. This was a sacrifice, and everyone knew it. She was 28 years old, a trained diplomat and scholar, and now she would become a political tool to stop a war that should never have started. The human delegation arrived at Summit 7 3 days later. The neutral space station orbited a dead moon, chosen specifically because it belonged to neither empire. Arya traveled there with a full escort of guards and advisors, all of them tense and watchful. Humans were dangerous. Everyone knew that. They fought without honor, used tactics that made no sense, and somehow, impossibly, they kept winning battles they should have lost. When Arya entered the meeting hall, she expected to see a monster. The reports all said that Commander Jake Morrison was humanity's most decorated soldier. He had fought in dozens of campaigns, led impossible victories, and earned a reputation that made even veteran Kelvar warriors nervous. Surely such a man would be cruel, arrogant, covered in scars, and radiating violence. Instead, she found herself looking at a man who seemed almost ordinary. Jake Morrison stood near the window, wearing a simple military uniform without excessive decoration. He was tall, with dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples, and eyes that were a deep brown. When he turned to face her, those eyes were tired. Not the exhaustion of a sleepless night, but something deeper, the kind of weariness that came from seeing too much and carrying too many memories. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that surprised her. "Princess Arya," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Thank you for coming." She nodded, unsure of what to say. Her diplomatic training kicked in automatically. "Commander Morrison, I understand we have matters to discuss." The negotiation lasted for hours. Diplomats from both sides argued over terms, conditions, and protocols. Through it all, Jake remained quiet, only speaking when directly addressed. He agreed to almost everything without complaint. He would leave his military post. He would live on a border world. He would learn Kelvar customs and language. He showed no anger, no resentment, no pride. During a break in the talks, Arya found herself alone with him on an observation deck. The silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. Finally, she spoke. "Why did you agree to this?" Jake looked out at the stars. "Because I'm tired of fighting. Because every battle I win means more people die. Because maybe, just maybe, this can actually work. You believe that? That a marriage can stop a war?" He turned to her, and for the first time she saw something other than weariness in his eyes. It was hope, fragile and small, but real. "I've seen what war does, Princess. To soldiers, to civilians, to entire worlds. If there's even a chance that this can prevent more of that, then yes, I believe it's worth trying." Arya found herself studying him more carefully. He was not what she expected. Where was the savage warrior? Where was the bloodthirsty killer that the reports described? This man seemed more like a scholar or a priest than a soldier. "The reports about you," she said slowly. "They say you're humanity's greatest weapon. That you've destroyed entire armies." Jake's expression didn't change. "Reports often exaggerate, do they?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I've done my duty. I've protected my people, that's all." But there was something in the way he said it. Something in the careful neutrality of his tone that made her wonder. She had been trained to read people, to see beneath the surface, and what she saw in Jake Morrison was a man carrying a heavy burden. Whatever he had done in the war, it haunted him. The wedding was set for 2 weeks later. It would be broadcast across both empires, a symbol of unity and hope. Arya returned to her homeworld to prepare, and in those 2 weeks, she learned more about her future husband through reports and files that her advisors provided. Jake Morrison, age 42. Born on Earth in a place called Oregon, joined the military at 18. rose through the ranks quickly, participated in the First Contact War, the Sigma Offensive, the defense of New Olympus, decorated 17 times, served in something called the Ghost Program, though the details were classified even in the human files they had managed to obtain. Her advisors warned her repeatedly, "He's dangerous, Princess. Humans are unpredictable. They don't have our psychic abilities, our superior technology. They win through deception and savagery." But Arya remembered the tired man on the observation deck. She remembered the hope in his eyes when he talked about ending the war. That didn't match the monster her people described. The wedding ceremony was a blend of both cultures. Arya wore traditional Kelvar robes of silver and blue, while Jake wore his military dress uniform. They spoke vows in both languages, promising to honor and protect each other, to serve as a bridge between their peoples. When it came time to seal the union, Jake took her hand gently. His touch was warm, careful, and somehow that small gesture meant more than all the grand speeches. Afterwards, at the reception, she watched him interact with guests from both sides. He was polite to everyone, respectful, even charming in a quiet way. He smiled at the right moments, laughed at appropriate jokes, and showed none of the discomfort she felt. When a Kelvar general made a comment about humans fighting like animals, Jake simply nodded and said, "We do what we must to survive, General. I'm sure you understand." The general had walked away looking unsettled, though Arya couldn't figure out why. It had seemed like a perfectly reasonable response. Later that night, as they prepared to depart for their new home on Haven's Gate, Jake found her on another balcony. She had escaped the crowds for a moment of peace, overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "Are you all right?" he asked, standing beside her but not too close. "I'm married to a stranger," she said. "I'm leaving everything I've known to live on a border world with someone my people consider an enemy. I'm expected to make this work, to be the symbol of peace, and I don't even know if peace is possible." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I don't know if it's possible either, but I know that I'll do everything I can to make this work, not because of politics or duty, but because you deserve better than to be just a symbol. You deserve to be happy." She looked at him surprised. "You barely know me. That's true, but I know you didn't ask for this. Neither of us did. So maybe we can figure it out together." Despite everything, despite her fears and doubts, Arya felt something shift inside her. This man, this human warrior that everyone feared, was offering her kindness. Not grand promises or empty flattery, but simple, genuine kindness. "Together," she repeated. "I think I'd like that." They left for Haven's Gate the next morning. The colony world was beautiful, covered in forests and mountains, with a small city that housed both Kelvar and human populations. Their residence was a compromise between both architectural styles, with high ceilings and open spaces that the Kelvar preferred, combined with the warmer colors and practical design that humans favored. Jake carried their bags inside himself, refusing the help of attendants. "I've been carrying my own gear for 24 years, he said with a slight smile. "I think I can manage a few more bags." Arya watched him move through the house, noting how he checked every room, every window, every entrance. It was automatic, unconscious. Even here, in what was supposed to be a safe space, he was evaluating, assessing, preparing. She wondered if he even realized he was doing it. That night, they had dinner together for the first time as husband and wife. Jake had cooked, surprisingly, a simple meal that combined ingredients from both cultures. "It wasn't fancy, but it was good. You cook?" She asked. "Field skill," he said. "When you're deployed for months at a time, you learn to make decent food from whatever you have available." "Tell me about Earth," she said. "I've read reports, but I want to know what it's really like," so he told her. He talked about oceans and mountains, about seasons changing and rain falling. He described cities filled with millions of people, and wilderness areas where you could walk for days without seeing another soul. He talked about music and art, about literature and history. And slowly, gradually, Arya began to see humanity not as the enemy, but as people. Complex, creative, flawed people who had built something beautiful on their world. When she finally went to bed that night in a room separate from his, by mutual unspoken agreement that they would take things slowly, she lay awake thinking about the day, about the man she had married, about the future that stretched before them, uncertain and strange. She had agreed to this marriage to stop a war. She had expected to. 6 months passed like water flowing down a gentle stream. Arya had expected marriage to be difficult. full of awkward silences and cultural misunderstandings. And there were plenty of those, certainly. But there were also moments of unexpected joy that caught her by surprise. Jake was patient in ways she never anticipated. When she struggled with human idioms or couldn't understand why humans found certain things funny, he explained without making her feel foolish. When she made mistakes with human customs, he simply smiled and showed her the correct way. He learned her language faster than she learned his, practiced her people's meditation techniques every morning, and studied Kelver history with genuine interest. They fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent in language lessons, teaching each other words and phrases. Afternoons, Arya handled diplomatic correspondence while Jake worked as an advisor to the colony's defense forces. Evenings were theirs alone. They would cook together, walk through the gardens near their home, or simply sit and talk about everything and nothing. Arya found herself laughing more than she had in years. Jake had a dry sense of humor that snuck up on her, deadpan observations that took a moment to register before they made her smile. He told stories about his childhood, about growing up on a farm, about his parents who had passed away years ago. He spoke about Earth with a fondness that made her wish she could see it herself, but he never talked about the war. Never mentioned battles or campaigns. When other soldiers greeted him with respect and called him commander, he politely corrected them. "Just Jake," he would say. "I'm retired." It was Katie, Jake's younger sister, who began to crack that careful silence. She arrived on Haven's Gate 3 months into the marriage, a whirlwind of energy and laughter. Katie was a medical researcher, brilliant and enthusiastic, with the same dark hair as her brother but eyes that sparkled with mischief. "So you're the princess who stole my brother's heart," Katie said when they first met, pulling Arya into an unexpected hug. "Welcome to the family. Fair warning, we're all a little crazy." Arya liked her immediately. Katie was easy to talk to, open and honest in ways that most diplomats never were. She visited often, staying for weeks at a time, and slowly the house felt less like a political arrangement and more like a home. One evening, while Jake was out meeting with colony officials, Arya and Katie sat on the back porch drinking tea. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. "He seems happy," Katie said, watching the sunset. "Happier than I've seen him in years." "I'm glad," Arya said. "I was worried at first. This marriage wasn't exactly normal," Katie laughed. "Nothing about Jake's life has been normal since he was 18. But this is good for him. You're good for him." "I don't really know much about his past," Arya admitted. "He doesn't talk about his military service." Katie's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "He wouldn't. Jake doesn't like to think about those days." "Was it really that bad?" "Worse than you can imagine," Katie said quietly. "The things they asked him to do, the things he had to become. The Ghost program broke a lot of soldiers. Jake was one of the few who survived it with his mind intact, but it cost him." Arya felt her heart clench. "What was the Ghost program?" Katie hesitated, then shook her head. "That's not my story to tell. But if you really want to know, the military records are partially declassified. You could look them up." That night, after Jake had gone to bed, Arya sat at her terminal and searched. The Ghost program. Most of the files were still classified, marked with security clearances she didn't have. But there were fragments, pieces of information that painted a disturbing picture. Special operations, deep infiltration, psychological warfare. The Ghosts were sent into impossible situations, expected to win against overwhelming odds using any means necessary. They were humanity's secret weapon, the soldiers who fought in the shadows, doing the dirty work that regular forces couldn't or wouldn't do. Jake had been in the program for 8 years. Arya sat back, her mind racing. The gentleman who cooked her breakfast every morning, who laughed at her terrible jokes and held her hand when they walked, had spent 8 years doing things that were too classified for even allied governments to know about. She understood now why he never talked about it, why he seemed to carry such weight on his shoulders, why his eyes sometimes went distant when he thought no one was watching. The next day there was a diplomatic dinner at the governor's mansion. Representatives from both species attended, celebrating another successful month of peaceful cooperation. Arya wore formal robes and Jake wore his dress uniform, though she noticed he wore no medals or decorations. During the dinner, a Kelvar noble named Lord Theron had too much to drink. He was an older warrior, from a generation that had fought in the early wars, and he had never approved of the marriage alliance. "Tell me, Commander Morrison," Theron said, his voice carrying across the room. "How does it feel to be humanity's dancing monkey? A prize bull offered up for breeding to secure peace?" The room went silent. Arya felt her face flush with anger, but before she could respond, Jake simply smiled. It was a cold smile, nothing like the warm expressions she had come to know. "I'm not a commander anymore, Lord Theron, just a husband trying to make his wife happy. As for feeling like a prize bull, well, I've been called worse things by better people." The insult was subtle but clear. Theron's face darkened. "You dare—" "I dare very little these days," Jake interrupted, his voice still calm. "I leave daring to younger men. Men who haven't learned yet that pride is expensive and peace is cheap." He stood up, offering his hand to Arya. "If you'll excuse us, Princess Arya isn't feeling well. We should go." They left the dinner early. In the transport home, Arya expected Jake to be angry, but he seemed relaxed, almost amused. "I'm sorry," she said. "Theron is a fool. You didn't have to endure that." "I've endured worse," Jake said simply. "Words can't hurt me, Arya, and getting angry would only have made things worse." "Doesn't it bother you, being insulted like that?" He was quiet for a moment. "He's afraid. His whole generation is afraid of humans, and fear makes people lash out. I understand that. I've seen it before. You're very calm about it." Jake looked at her, and there was something in his eyes, something calculating that was there and gone so fast she almost missed it. "I learned a long time ago that staying calm is the best weapon. Angry people make mistakes. Calm people win." The comment stuck with her. She realized that Jake was always calm, always measured, always in control. She had thought it was simply his personality, but now she wondered if it was something else. Something trained into him until it became automatic. That night she found him awake at 2 a.m, sitting in front of multiple screens showing security feeds from around the colony. His eyes moved from screen to screen, tracking patterns, evaluating threats that probably didn't exist. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. He looked surprised, as if he hadn't heard her approach. "Old habits. I keep thinking I should check the perimeter, review the guard rotations, update threat assessments." "Jake, there's no threat. We're safe here, I know. Logically, I know that. But my brain doesn't want to accept it. I spent so many years where being alert meant staying alive. It's hard to turn that off." She took his hand. "Is this what the Ghost program did to you?" He tensed slightly. "Katie told you about that?" She mentioned it. "I looked up what I could find." Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally he spoke. "They trained us to see everything as a potential threat, to always be 3 steps ahead, to never stop planning and preparing. It made us effective. It also made us paranoid." He squeezed her hand gently. "I'm trying, Arya. I'm trying to be the husband you deserve, not the soldier I was trained to be. But some days it's harder than others." "I don't want you to be anyone but yourself," she said. "All of yourself. The parts you're proud of and the parts you're not. You don't know all the parts yet. Then show me. Trust me." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. It was like watching a wall come down brick by brick. "There are things I've done that would horrify you. Maybe. But they wouldn't change how I feel about you." It was the first time she admitted it out loud, but it was true. Somewhere in the last 6 months she had fallen in love with this complicated, damaged, gentle man. She loved his patience and his kindness. She loved the way he made her laugh and the way he listened when she talked. And yes, she even loved the darker parts of him. The soldier who never quite stopped being vigilant because that was part of who he was. Jake pulled her close, holding her like she was something precious. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Good thing it's not about deserving," she whispered back. "It's about choosing, and I choose you." They sat there together watching the security feeds flicker in the darkness, and Arya thought about the future, about the life they were building together, about the possibility of children someday, of growing old together, of real happiness. She didn't know that in less than a week everything would change, that an enemy beyond anything either empire had faced would come screaming out of the dark, that she would finally see the soldier Jake had been, the weapon humanity had created. For now there was only this moment, this peace, this quiet before the bunker shook as another explosion rocked the colony. Arya held Katie close as dust rained down from the ceiling. Around them, hundreds of civilians, both Kelvar and human, huddled together in fear. Children were crying. Adults whispered prayers in a dozen different languages. "We need to know what's happening," Arya said, pulling away from Katie. "I'm going to the command center." Jake said to stay here. Katie protested. "Your brother doesn't give me orders," Arya replied, more sharply than she intended. "I'm the princess of the Kelvar Empire. If our people are dying, I need to be there." She grabbed 2 security guards and made her way through the underground tunnels toward the command center. The journey took 20 minutes, navigating through panicked crowds and emergency personnel rushing in every direction. When she finally reached the command center, she pushed through the doors and stopped dead. The room was chaos. Displays showed the colony under assault from every direction. Military officers from both species shouted orders and coordinates. In the center of it all stood General Marcus Cole, the human officer in charge of Haven's Gate's defense. He was a large man with gray hair and a face carved from granite, and right now he looked terrified. "We have 75,000 hostiles on the ground," someone was saying. 3 full armies. They're coming from the north, east, and south. We have 800 Kelvar soldiers and 200 human marines. "Sir, we can't hold this." "Evacuation?" Marcus demanded. "Impossible. They've got the spaceport." "We're grounded." Arya's blood ran cold. 75,000 against 1,000. It was a massacre waiting to happen. She scanned the room looking for Jake and found him standing in front of a tactical display. Perfectly still, his eyes moving over the holographic map like he was reading a book. Then Jake spoke, and his voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "General Cole," everyone turned. Marcus looked at Jake with something that might have been hope or might have been desperation. "Commander Morrison, I'm not a commander anymore, but you were. You were the best we had." Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm out of my depth here, Jake. This isn't a border skirmish. This is extinction. So I'm asking, I'm begging, take tactical command." The room went silent. Every eye was on Jake. Arya watched her husband, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw him hesitate. Saw the internal war playing out behind his eyes. Then his shoulders straightened, his expression went blank, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Colder, harder, mechanical. "All right. Everyone link your systems to my station. I need real-time data on troop movements, supply caches, terrain mapping, weather patterns, and civilian locations. I need it now." People jumped to obey. Arya moved closer, staying out of the way but unwilling to leave. She needed to see this, needed to understand what was about to happen. Jake's fingers flew over the controls, pulling up information faster than seemed possible. The Vrex fight in massed formations. They rely on overwhelming numbers and berserker charges. No subtlety, no complex tactics. They expect us to meet them head-on. His eyes never left the displays. "So we won't." "What's your plan?" Marcus asked. "We turn the colony into a maze. We use their aggression against them. We make them bleed for every meter." Jake highlighted sections of the city. "Kelvar forces will use psionic projection to create false troop movements here, here, and here. Human marines will strip their identification tags and scatter into the ruins. No formations, no standard deployments. We become ghosts," a Kelvar officer spoke up. "You want us to abandon military doctrine entirely?" "Doctrine is designed for conventional warfare. This isn't conventional." Jake pulled up imagery of the Vrex forces. They were massive creatures, built like bears but walking upright, covered in thick armor plates and carrying crude but effective weapons. They've conquered 40 star systems using the same strategy every time. Charge forward, overwhelm the defenders, slaughter everyone. It's worked because everyone tried to fight them traditionally. We won't. "You're talking about guerrilla tactics," Marcus said. "I'm talking about making them afraid of the dark." Orders went out. Arya watched as the organized military response dissolved into something that looked like chaos, but she suspected was anything but. Human marines grabbed supplies and scattered into the city. Kelvar psychics began their work, creating illusions and false trails. Jake orchestrated it all from the command center, his voice never rising, never showing emotion, just pure tactical calculation. "Princess," he said without looking at her, "you should return to the bunker." No. Now he did look at her, and she almost stepped back from what she saw in his eyes. This wasn't her husband. This was someone else wearing his face. Someone cold and focused and absolutely lethal. "Arya, please, I'm staying. I need to see this." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay behind me. Don't interfere." The first Vrex wave hit the colony's northern perimeter at dusk, 3,000 of them, charging forward with weapons firing, roaring their battle cries. The Kelvar defensive line opened fire, cutting down dozens, but the Vreks kept coming. They were fearless, maybe even mindless, driven by battle rage. Then something strange happened. The Vreks suddenly changed direction, veering east toward what their sensors showed as a major human encampment. They charged forward, smashing through buildings, firing at everything. But when they arrived, there was nothing. Just empty structures and holographic projections. The Kelvar psychics had fooled them. "Marines, engage," Jake said calmly. From the ruins, from rooftops, from underground passages, human soldiers appeared. They fired from concealment using weapons that made almost no sound, taking down Vreks warriors and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The Vreks tried to chase them, but the Marines were already gone, vanished like ghosts. Arya watched the tactical display in horror and fascination. It wasn't a battle. It was a hunt. Jake had turned the city into a killing ground, and the Vreks were dying without ever seeing their attackers. Every street became a trap. Every building became a sniper nest. The enemy's numbers meant nothing when they couldn't find anyone to fight. "Second wave incoming from the east," someone reported. 20,000 hostiles. "Let them land," Jake said. "Kelvar forces, pull back to positions 7 through 12. Make them think they're winning." "That's a retreat," a Kelvar officer protested. "That's bait," Jake corrected. "They'll follow you right into the industrial sector. All those factories, all that machinery, all those shadows. Perfect terrain for our purposes." It happened exactly as he predicted. The Vreks forces pursued the retreating Kelvar into the industrial zone, thinking they had them on the run. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Human Marines had rigged the entire sector with improvised explosives. Buildings collapsed on top of Vreks formations. Chemical fires erupted, filling the air with toxic smoke. And in the chaos, the Marines struck again and again, phantoms in the darkness. By midnight, 12,000 Vreks were dead. The human Marines had lost 3 soldiers. Arya couldn't believe what she was seeing. The numbers should have been impossible. But Jake had turned the battle into something that numbers didn't matter for. He had made the Vreks' strength into weakness, their aggression into liability. Every time they charged forward, they died. Every time they tried to group up, they became targets. And through it all, Jake remained perfectly calm, adjusting his strategy in real time, always 3 steps ahead. "The Vreks command should be getting confused right now," he said, studying the enemy's movements. "They're used to winning by dawn. Instead, they're losing soldiers at an unsustainable rate, and they can't even find us." He highlighted a section of the map. "They'll try one more major push, bringing all their forces together for an overwhelming assault. When they do, we'll be ready." "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "We let them come. We let them think they figured us out. Then we hit them with everything we have left." Katie, who had insisted on coming to the command center as a medical officer, moved to stand beside Arya. "I've never seen him like this," she whispered. "I've heard the stories, but seeing it is different." "What is he?" Arya asked quietly. "He's what humanity created to survive. We're not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the toughest. But we're adaptable. We learn, we overcome. Jake is the very best of that." Katie's voice was sad, and the very worst. The final Vreks push came at dawn. 50,000 warriors, nearly their entire remaining force, formed up in the open plains outside the city. They were going to charge all at once, a massive wave of violence that would crush everything in its path. Jake watched them gather on the displays. His fingers drummed once on the console, the only sign of emotion Arya had seen from him in hours. "All forces fall back to the inner city. Everyone behind the secondary walls, now." "We're abandoning the outer districts?" someone asked. "We're giving them what they want." "A target!" the Vreks charged. The ground shook from thousands of feet, pounding in unison. They roared their battle cries, fired their weapons, a tide of destruction heading straight for the city. Jake waited. His hand hovered over a control panel. Around him, officers held their breath. The Vreks got closer, 1,000 meters. 500. 200 now, Jake said and pressed the button. The world exploded. The human Marines hadn't just rigged the industrial. Jake hadn't slept in 3 days. Arya could see it in the dark circles under his eyes, in the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. Medical stimulants kept him sharp, but they were a poor substitute for actual rest. She wanted to force him to sleep, to eat something more than nutrient bars, but she knew he wouldn't stop, not until this was finished. The command center had transformed into something that looked more like a mad scientist's laboratory than a military headquarters. Engineers from both species worked side by side, tearing apart Vrex technology and rebuilding it into something new. Jake moved between workstations, checking calculations, offering suggestions, his brilliant mind working at a speed that seemed almost inhuman. The planet's magnetic field is already strong, Jake explained to a group of engineers, pointing at holographic displays. We're just going to make it stronger, much stronger. Channel all the energy through these nodes, create a focused pulse, and send it straight up. You want to turn the entire planet into an electromagnetic pulse cannon, one of the Kelvar scientists said, his voice filled with disbelief. That's impossible. It's improbable, Jake corrected. Impossible would be trying to fight a battleship with what we have left. This is just difficult. He highlighted sections of the map. The Vrex power cores will provide the initial charge. We daisy-chain them through the existing power grid, amplify through the magnetic field generators, and release it all at once. The feedback could destroy half the city, the scientist protested. The battleship will destroy the entire planet, Jake replied calmly. I'll take my chances with feedback. Marcus Cole approached Arya where she stood watching. The general looked exhausted, but there was something like awe in his eyes. I've served with Jake for 15 years. I've seen him do impossible things, but this is beyond anything I've witnessed. He's different now, Arya said quietly, since the battle started. It's like he's not even human anymore. Oh, he's human. That's the terrifying part. Marcus watched Jake work. Most species are good at one thing. Kelvar have psionics. Vrex have numbers and ferocity. Humans, we're good at adapting, at taking whatever we have and turning it into something deadly. Jake is what happens when you take that ability and refine it to perfection. Arya thought about that, about how Jake had taken a losing battle and turned it into a slaughter. How he was now taking salvaged alien technology and a planet's natural magnetic field and building a weapon that shouldn't exist. Humans didn't win by being stronger. They won by being clever, by being willing to try things that no one else would think of. Katie found her later, as Jake was running the final calculations. How is he? Arya asked. Physically? Running on stimulants and willpower. Mentally? Katie shook her head. He's in what he calls operational mode. It's how he survives these situations. He turns off everything human, all the emotions and doubt, and becomes purely tactical. It's effective, but when it's over, it all comes crashing back. What do I do? Be there for him. That's all you can do. He'll need you when this is over, when he has to face what he's done. 2 hours into the countdown, the Vrex battleship, the Devourer, moved into a lower orbit. Long-range scans showed it preparing weapons, massive cannons that could literally crack a planet's crust. Warlord Kresh sent another transmission. Your time is running out, humans. Surrender now or die. Jake ignored the transmission, focused entirely on the work. Teams of soldiers and engineers worked around the clock, installing equipment, running cables, checking and rechecking connections. The entire city had been evacuated to the bunkers. If this failed, if the feedback was too strong or the calculations were wrong, thousands could die. But if they did nothing, everyone would die. With 30 minutes left, Jake finally stepped back from the main console. It's ready. Will it work? Marcus asked. Honestly, I give it about 60% odds. The theory is sound, but we're working with salvaged equipment and improvised connections. Could work perfectly. Could blow up in our faces. Jake pulled up the targeting display. Either way, we're about to find out. The command center filled with officers and officials. Everyone wanted to see this, to witness either their salvation or their destruction. Arya stood beside Jake, refusing to leave his side. If this was the end, she wanted to face it with him. Jake's hands moved over the controls, arming the system. Power readings climbed steadily as Vrex cores channeled energy into the grid. The lights in the city dimmed as every available watt was redirected to the magnetic field generators. The air itself seemed to hum with building energy. Warlord Kresh is hailing us again, someone reported. Put him through, Jake said. The Vrex appeared on screen, his scarred face twisted in rage. Your time is up, human. Any last words before I turn your world to ash? Jake looked at the warlord, and his expression was cold. So cold that Arya felt a chill run down her spine. I told you to run. You should have listened. Empty threats from a dead man. Let me tell you something about humans, Jake said, his voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest. We don't have psionics or natural armor or overwhelming numbers, but we have one gift that's better than all of those things. We refuse to quit. You can beat us down, you can destroy our worlds, you can kill billions of us, but we'll keep coming back. We'll adapt, we'll learn, and we'll find a way to hurt you. That's what makes us dangerous. Not our weapons, not our tactics. Our pure, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Pretty speech. It won't save you. I don't need a speech to save me. I have physics. Jake pressed a button. Fire, the planet screamed. That was the only way Arya could describe it. Every magnetic field generator on Haven's Gate activated simultaneously, channeling unimaginable amounts of energy upward in a focused beam. The sky turned blue-white with electromagnetic radiation. The Devourer, massive and powerful, sat directly in the path. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the battleship's lights flickered. Sparks flew from its hull. Internal systems fried, power cores overloaded, weapon systems melted from the inside out. The ship that had threatened to destroy them all went dark in an instant, its systems completely destroyed. The dead battleship, now just a massive piece of metal, began to fall. Its orbit decayed rapidly without engines to maintain altitude. Within minutes it hit atmosphere, burning up in a streak of fire across the sky. The debris that made it to the surface scattered across the empty plains outside the city, far from any population center. The command center erupted in cheers. Humans and Kelvar embraced, celebrating their impossible victory. Marcus was laughing, tears streaming down his face. Engineers high-fived and danced. Even the usually stoic Kelvar soldiers were smiling. Jake stood perfectly still, staring at the displays showing the falling debris. His face was blank, empty of any emotion. Arya watched him carefully and saw his hands starting to shake harder. The stimulants were wearing off and everything he'd been holding back was about to crash down on him. "Jake?" she said softly. He looked at her and his eyes were lost. "I need to finish the sweep. Need to make sure there are no remaining Vrex forces. Need to secure the perimeter. His voice broke. You need to rest," Arya said firmly. She took his arm. "Marcus can handle the cleanup. You've done enough." For a moment she thought he would argue. Then he just nodded, letting her guide him away from the command center. They walked through the corridors in silence, Jake moving like a man in a dream. When they reached their home, he collapsed on the couch, his whole body shaking. 75,000 Vrex on the ground, he whispered. Thousands more on that ship. All dead because of me. All alive because of you, Arya corrected, sitting beside him. Everyone in this colony, human and Kelvar both. Thousands of lives saved, by killing tens of thousands. Yes. She didn't try to soften it, didn't try to make it easier. You did terrible things. Necessary things. Things no one else could have done. And yes, that's a burden, but you don't carry it alone. Jake looked at her with haunted eyes. How can you stand to be near me? After watching what I'm capable of? Because I also watched you plan everything to minimize civilian casualties. I saw you hesitate before taking command. Saw you not wanting to become that person again. I saw the man who'd rather fight with a weapon made of magnets and salvaged tech than endanger his own people with a ground assault. She took his hands. You're not a monster, Jake. You're a man who does monstrous things when necessary. There's a difference. Katie appeared in the doorway with a medical kit. Stimulant crash is hitting. He needs sedatives and about 20 hours of sleep. No, Jake protested weakly. Need to debrief. Need to write reports. You need to shut up and let me take care of you, Katie said, already preparing an injection. Doctor's orders. The sedative hit fast. Jake's eyes drooped and he slumped against Arya. She held him as he finally let go of the iron control he'd maintained for 3 days. He mumbled something she couldn't quite hear, then fell into a deep sleep. He'll have nightmares, Katie warned. The crash is always hard on him. I'll stay with him. The next few days were a blur. The Vrex horde, hearing about the destruction of the Devourer, and 3 entire armies sued for peace. The tribunal convened 1 week after the battle. Representatives from both the Kelvar Empire and human government filled the Grand Chamber on Summit 7, the same neutral station where Arya had first met Jake. It felt like a lifetime ago. Though less than a year had passed, Jake stood in the center of the chamber, still wearing his simple uniform, refusing the formal dress that had been offered. He looked thin, worn, but his back was straight and his gaze steady. Arya sat in the observation gallery, Katie beside her, watching her husband face judgment from two empires. The charges were strange. Not failure or cowardice or dereliction of duty. The Kelvar senators argued that Jake was too dangerous to be allowed to exist, that a single person with such capacity for destruction threatened the balance of power, that his methods, while effective, were too brutal, too terrifying. Several human admirals agreed, though their reasoning was different. They worried about precedent, about other soldiers thinking they could take such unilateral action. Senator Talon of the Kelvar spoke first. Commander Morrison destroyed 75,000 VREX ground forces with minimal casualties on our side. This is unprecedented, impossible, and frankly terrifying. We cannot allow such power to exist unchecked. Admiral Grant from the human delegation stood. Jake Morrison followed orders and saved a colony. He used unorthodox tactics, yes. But warfare is about results, not comfort. The Vrex horde has been our enemy for decades. Now they're suing for peace because they're afraid. How is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing when one man can inspire that level of fear, another Kelvar senator argued. What happens when he decides we're the enemy? Can anyone stop him? The debate raged for hours. Some defended Jake passionately, calling him a hero who saved thousands. Others condemned him, calling him a weapon too dangerous to allow freedom. Through it all, Jake remained silent, standing at attention, his face showing nothing. Finally, the mediator called for Jake to speak in his own defense. He stepped forward and the chamber went quiet. I don't have a defense, Jake said simply. Everything they've said about me is true. I am dangerous. I am capable of terrible things. I've ended more lives than I can count, and I'll carry that weight until the day I die. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I didn't choose to become this. I was 18 when I joined the military. Young, idealistic, wanting to serve my species. The Ghost program took that boy and turned him into a weapon. They trained me to think like this, to see every situation as a puzzle that could be solved with the right application of violence. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of senators and admirals alike. You made me this way. Humanity needed soldiers who could win impossible battles, so you created programs to make them. You needed people who could set aside morality for the mission, so you trained us to compartmentalize. And yes, it worked. We won your wars. We protected your borders. We did the things you needed done but didn't want to think about. And now you regret that? Senator Talon asked. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we live in a universe where such people need to exist. Jake's voice was steady, but Arya could see the pain behind his eyes. But no, I don't regret saving those people on Haven's Gate. Given the same situation, I'd do it again. Every time. Even knowing the cost? Especially knowing the cost. It was Arya who stood up next, stepping forward from the gallery despite protocol. May I speak? The mediator looked uncertain but nodded. The princess may address the tribunal. Arya walked to stand beside her husband. I watched everything that happened on Haven's Gate. I saw the battle from beginning to end. And yes, what Jake did was terrible. It was brutal and efficient and terrifying. But I also saw something else. She looked around the chamber. I saw him hesitate before taking command. I saw him plan operations to minimize civilian casualties when he could have simply focused on killing the enemy. I saw him break down afterwards, crushed by the weight of all those deaths. That's not a weapon. That's a man who knows the cost of war and pays it anyway to protect others. The princess is biased, a senator pointed out. She's his wife. Yes, I am. And that gives me a perspective none of you have. Arya's voice was strong, confident. Before I met Jake, I believed what you all believe. That humans are savage. That they win through brutality and deception. But I've learned the truth. Humans win because they refuse to quit. Because they adapt to any situation. Because they'll pay any price, bear any burden to protect what they love. Jake Morrison is the very best of that. And yes, he's also the very worst of it. But that duality, that contradiction, that's what makes him human. The chamber erupted in argument. For 3 more hours they debated and discussed. Finally they came to a decision. Jake Morrison, the mediator announced. This tribunal finds that your actions, while extreme, were justified given the circumstances. You are cleared of all charges. However, you are hereby retired from all active military service. You will serve as an advisor on human Kelvar joint military operations. but you will not take field command again unless under direct order from both governments. Do you accept these terms? Jake nodded. I accept. Then this tribunal is concluded. As people filed out, Marcus approached Jake and pulled him into a rough embrace. You scared the hell out of me, you know? Thought they might lock you up or worse. So did I, Jake admitted quietly. For what it's worth, every soldier on Haven's Gate would follow you into hell, human and Kelvar both. What you did there, it's going to change how we think about warfare. That's what I'm afraid of. They returned to Haven's Gate 2 days later. The colony was slowly rebuilding, scars of battle still visible but hope returning. Memorials had been erected for the soldiers who fell. Both species worked together now with a new understanding. Bonds forged in shared survival. Arya watched Jake as they walked through the recovering city. He stopped at each memorial, reading every name, remembering every face. She knew he was cataloging them, adding them to the weight he already carried. But she also saw how people reacted to him. How human Marines nodded with respect. How Kelvar soldiers, who had fought under his command, treated him with something close to reverence. How civilians who owed their lives to him smiled and thanked him. He had saved them all, and they knew it, even if he couldn't accept it himself. That night in their home, Arya found Jake sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. She sat beside him, taking his hand. I keep seeing them, he said quietly. Every Vrex I killed. Every soldier who died following my orders. Every face, I know. How do you live with it? How do you move forward carrying this? One day at a time. One moment at a time. She squeezed his hand. And you don't carry it alone. They sat in silence for a while. Then Jake spoke again, his voice so soft she almost missed it. I'm scared, Arya. Scared that this is all I am. That without war, without missions, I'm nothing. Just a broken weapon with no purpose. Then we'll find a new purpose together. She turned to face him. Jake, you're more than what they made you. You're kind. You're thoughtful. You make terrible jokes and cook amazing food and have more patience than anyone I've ever met. That's who you are when the war is over. That's the man I fell in love with. What if war comes again? Then you'll do what you must. And I'll be here when it's over, helping you carry the weight. She smiled. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Being there for the best and worst parts of each other. Jake pulled her close, holding her like she was his anchor to humanity. I don't deserve you. Good thing love isn't about deserving. 3 months later, life had found a new normal. Jake worked as an advisor, teaching both human and Kelvar officers about tactical thinking and adaptive warfare. He was good at it, patient with students who struggled to understand concepts that came naturally to him. Arya continued her diplomatic work, strengthening ties between their peoples. Katie stayed on Haven's Gate, setting up a medical research facility with both human and Kelvar scientists. She visited them often, bringing laughter and light into their home. The Vrex horde kept their distance, their fear of humanity now legendary. Other species took note. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about what happened when you threatened humans and those they loved. One evening, as they walked through the gardens near their home, Arya stopped Jake with a gentle touch on his arm. I have news. He looked at her, concern immediate in his eyes. What kind of news? She smiled, nervous and excited and terrified all at once. I'm pregnant. For a moment, Jake just stared. Then his expression transformed, joy breaking through the careful control he usually maintained. Really? Really? The doctors confirmed it yesterday, a girl. The first human Kelvar hybrid ever born. Jake pulled her into his arms and she felt him shaking. I'm going to be a father, he whispered. Me, the soldier who's killed thousands. I'm going to have a daughter. You're going to be a wonderful father, Arya said firmly. You'll teach her to be strong and clever, to think before she acts, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and you'll teach her to be gentle and kind, to cook and laugh and find joy in small things. All of it, everything you are. What if I mess up? What if I can't be both? What if... She kissed him, cutting off the spiral of worry. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what we do.